Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us on The World today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up on the program. Israeli forces launch ground assault on Deir al-Balah in central Gaza, despite 26 nations signing a statement for an end to the war. At least 19 people dead after a Bangladeshi Air Force training jet crashes into a school campus in the capital, Dhaka. And a whole lot more. Let's begin The World today. Israeli tanks have launched the first ground assault on Deir al-Balah in central Gaza. That's where you'll find thousands of people displaced by the assault across Gaza and where the remaining Israeli hostages are believed to be held. Experts warn that more than 1.5 million people in Gaza, that's 2/3 of the pre-war population, are at risk of severe malnutrition or starvation until at least October. A recent report by the IPC, a global agency that specializes in food security, says goods indispensable for people's survival are either depleted or expected to run out in the coming weeks. A recent report says the IDF has also launched air attacks on Deir al-Balah, the first time since October 2023 that the area of central Gaza has been targeted by IDF ground forces. In the meantime, attacks are still being carried out elsewhere in Gaza, including airstrikes on Gaza City. According to the Hamas-run health ministry, over 59,000 people have been killed and over 142,000 injured in the Strip since Israel launched its offensive against Hamas on October 7, 2023. Before the offensive by the IDF on Deir al-Balah, thousands of Palestinians were forced to move from safer areas, complained about how difficult it had been during this period of uncertainty. Some spoke about how they've been forced to move from Khan Yunis to Rafah and from Rafah to Deir al-Balah before being told again they'd have to move. On Sunday, the Israeli army spokesperson Avichai Adrei issued a warning to all those present in the southwestern area, including those staying in tents in the area. As the first time the Israeli army has announced a ground military operation in the area, effectively cutting off the northern part of the Gaza Strip from the south. The situation in Gaza is not lost to Moroccans sympathizing with the people there. On Sunday, there was a huge protest in the capital, Rabat, as people demanded urgent humanitarian access to Gaza, highlighting what they call the killings, displacement, and starvation of the Palestinian people. The crowds chanted various slogans, but mainly they had to do with starvation and no normalization of the situation in Gaza. The protests come amid warnings from international aid organizations about deteriorating conditions in Gaza, where many residents are reportedly facing extreme shortages of essential supplies. Let's talk now to national security analyst and intelligence officer specializing in Middle East affairs, Dan Pfefferman. He is in Tel Aviv. Dan, thanks for joining us on the program today.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you.
These assaults by the IDF are coming amid so much suffering already in Gaza. What justification do you think there is for the attacks?
Look, it's not always clear to the outside, and Israeli leaders have to be very careful what information they transmit. But it is clear that, first of all, Hamas has not agreed to the terms for a ceasefire. They've been on the table since the July 6 talks began in Doha in Qatar. And the American mediators and all the mediators have made it clear that Hamas is dragging its legs. All of this suffering, and there clearly is a lot of suffering in Gaza for the civilian population there, could have been ended immediately. Hamas can surrender its arms, can surrender this conflict that it instigated on October 7th. They didn't have to start a conflict. It broke a ceasefire on October 7th that was in place. It launched this vicious attack on Israel. And it chooses time and again to perpetuate the conflict instead of laying down its arms, handing control of Gaza over to Arab forces or to other Palestinian non-Hamas militants, and to end this conflict. And they choose not only to perpetuate the conflict, but they choose to fight in and amongst Gazan civilians and amongst civilian infrastructure, thus perpetuating. And so Israel launched this assault on the Deir al-Balach area, an area that it had previously not invaded, because it is trying to minimize civilian casualties as much as possible. It is a very difficult thing to do in a crowded place such as Gaza, and the population, unfortunately, has to be moved around and around. It's in a very confusing and a very disconcerting way in order to ensure that they are not in the areas of the fighting. Previously, Israeli intelligence had assumed, from what we know from press reports, that the hostages were being held in that area, and so it had also avoided striking those areas lest Hamas either execute the remaining prisoners, as it has in the past. It's executed Israeli hostages, or that the Israeli airstrikes would actually harm the hostages themselves. And so it seems that either the hostages are not being held in that area anymore, or Hamas has regrouped to that area, thus prompting the IDF to need to go after them in those areas.
Right. So Deir al-Balah is one of the safest places considered in Gaza. People have been taken shelter there because of the fighting going on in other parts of Gaza. But they've had to move again on Sunday following that announcement by the IDF, which makes one wonder which places are still considered safe in Gaza right now.
Right, and there's a number of so-called safe zones. Of course, no place is immune. And again, the problem is, and we need to keep reminding, I see the international community is very good at organizing pressure on Israel. It has not once, since Hamas launched and instigated this attack, organized pressure on Hamas. Hamas can end this war immediately. Hamas could have ended this war a year ago. Hamas could have ended this war on October 8th. Hamas, of course, didn't need to start this war. This was an unprovoked war by Hamas. And so Hamas is fighting and hiding and using human shields in order to either shield itself from the Israeli attacks, or to sacrifice, as part of their strategy, Gazan civilians to capture and create. They also create a lot of images of Palestinian suffering. They direct them. Al Jazeera has been absolutely complicit in this, in order to create pressure on Israel, when the most immediate, logical, and simple solution to this entire conflict that, once again, Hamas instigated would be for Hamas to disarm, surrender, and give back the hostages. And so Israel has to keep finding ways to ramp up the military pressure. Since July 6th, Israel has agreed to the Witkoff, the U.S. Envoy to the Middle East, to the Witkoff proposal, and Hamas keeps insisting on terms that are not logical for the losing side of a conflict. Hamas instigated a conflict that it is losing, and it is refusing to accept terms for its surrender, and so that the Gazan people can move on with their lives and rebuild Gaza. And unfortunately, it is the Gazan civilians that are caught here in the middle.
So much destruction going on in Gaza. I'm not sure exactly where those Palestinians hope to take refuge next, but we've seen pictures of them carrying as much as what they have left to seek refuge elsewhere. Let's talk about those hostages now, the Israeli hostages still being held by Hamas. Deir al-Balah was believed to have been, one of the points where these hostages were being held. And then, you have the Israeli Defense Forces attacking the area. What is the belief here, and what is the goal? Is it really to rescue the hostages? Because there is a possibility that if they are being held in Deir al-Balah, then they could be hit by those airstrikes by the Israeli Defense Forces.
Sure. I'll open by saying here on this that we never know what exactly it is that Israeli intelligence knows. And it's a good thing that it's kept out of the public eye. What I'm saying then is based on assumptions, and it's based on previous experience of the last 600 plus days. It has been very difficult to rescue the hostages with military campaigns or intelligence campaigns, because most of them, from what we know, are being held under heavily secured and booby-trapped tunnels. In the last case, when 6 hostages were found in the Rafah area, when Israeli forces were within a kilometer of them, they were executed before the Israeli forces could arrive. And so it is less realistic that Israel is trying to physically rescue them. What we think is happening is either the hostages were moved out of the Deir al-Balah area, or the IDF senses that it needs to ramp up the military pressure on Hamas as it goes into new areas. And Deir al-Balach is an area that the IDF has not really operated before. It flushes out militants, it flushes out Hamas terrorists, it kills or arrests a lot of them, it gathers new intelligence, and most importantly, it is destroying critical military infrastructure, such as tunnels, such as rocket launchers, such as arms stores, such as communications equipment that allow Hamas to continue this protracted guerrilla and terror campaign that it is conducting on Israel. And the goal is to ramp up enough pressure on Hamas, on the remaining leadership, on the remaining militants, for them to either surrender or to neutralize them as much as possible, so that they come to the negotiating table in Doha, in Qatar, and they accept the realistic demands being put on them by the international community, backed by the United States, by the Arab countries, who are all telling Hamas the same thing. This is a war you shouldn't have started. This is a war that you lost. It's time you accept Israel's reasonable demands and end this conflict for the sake of the hostages and for the sake of Gaza's civilians, who once again are unfortunately caught in the middle due to the intransigence of the Hamas terrorist group.
Dan, why do you think Hamas is holding back? Why do you think it's refusing to agree to these demands by the Israeli government and by all these other interested parties who want to see peace in Gaza and who want to see peace in the Middle East?
Sure. Well, first of all, it needs to be made very clear. Hamas does not want to see peace in Gaza, and Hamas does not want to see peace in the Middle East. Hamas is a jihadist terrorist organization beholden to the Muslim Brotherhood, beholden to Iran and its destructive ideology, and is the last entity that cares anything about the Palestinian civilians. It not only massacred 1,200 Israeli civilians on October 7th, it has been massacring and abusing and torturing Palestinian civilians for decades. The former Hamas leader, Yahya Sinwar, received his nickname, the Butcher, not because of anything he did to Israel, but because of his abuse and mutilation and despotism over Gazan civilians. Hamas does not seek to see peace, and they understand that if they accept these reasonable demands by the United States, by Israel, by Qatar, by Egypt, by the entire international community, it spells the end of the Hamas leadership. And so they have said in their own words, in Arabic, time and again, they will sacrifice every last Palestinian civilian. They've already sacrificed the infrastructure. They will sacrifice every last Palestinian civilian in order to continue waging this senseless war on Israel, in order to ensure its destruction. They do not care about the Gazan civilians. They do not seek peace. They seek war for the sake of war and destruction. And this is an unfortunate incident. That's why they're not able to accept the terms, because the terms would essentially mean their defeat. And they want to come out of this in the same position that they were on October 6th of 2023, with them being in power in the Gaza Strip. If what they wanted was to be in power in the Gaza Strip, they didn't have to launch this deadly and brutal and horrendous attack on Israel, and of course elicit and draw Israel's response. They knew exactly what would happen, and they hoped the region would join in an all-out war on Israel, which it did for a short time. They thought that they were able to poison international public opinion by manipulating the United Nations and by manipulating people in the streets of different Western capitals, which they are doing quite effectively, and be able to come to power to launch another October 7th on Israel again and again. And they've said this very clearly in their own words, which is that's why they're not ending this war.
Well, bearing that in mind, Dan, do you think that the attacks on civilians at the UN aid convoys was possibly Hamas attacking its own people, the Palestinians who had come to receive aid, people impoverished by the war, because there are accusations against the IDF that it did carry out those attacks against those 76 innocent people, but the Israeli government says the IDF was attacking militants in the area. They had seen some interesting elements in the area, and those were the targets of those attacks. So do you think that Hamas was possibly also behind those attacks, especially with the reports becoming more frequent now about attacks near UN aid convoys?
Yeah, what we know is that, first of all, war is what's called the fog of war. It's chaotic, and it's not clear to understand exactly what's happening in real time if you want to be intellectually honest. What we know to have happened, Israel does not target civilians. In the few instances in which Israel has targeted civilians, it has investigated it. Those were accidents, either technical accidents or intelligence failures. By and large, Israel does not target civilians. That has never been its policy. That has never been its strategy. And so the accusations that Israel does that are simply flat out false. What we do know is that time and again, since the GHF American mechanism has come in to distribute aid to Gazans and to bypass the Hamas basically looting mechanism, which Hamas is already corrupted the UN aid mechanisms, and it loots them, and then it sells that aid back to the Gazans at exorbitant prices. Hamas has made $1 billion in profit off of looting UN aid and then reselling it back to the Gazans. And so what we know is that in multiple instances, Hamas has instigated violence near these aid points. And then either the IDF fires warning shots in the area, or it's very possible that while the IDF is trying to target Hamas civilians who purposefully hide among Gazan civilians, that civilians are harmed in the process. I don't know to tell you for sure. These things need to be investigated very clearly. The one thing that is for sure here is that Israel does not purposefully target civilians, and that Hamas has utilized these aid distribution points in order to shoot at Gazans, in order to instigate chaos, in order to elicit some kind of fire, either from the Israeli forces near the area or possibly from some of the contractors in the area, in order to delegitimize them in the eyes of the international media.
I'm sure that Israeli media should be very interested in what's been going on in Gaza. I know that they should be reporting on that. How do Israelis feel about these fresh attacks on Deir al-Balah, one of the safest zones in Gaza?
Yeah, Israeli media, of course, has been covering this extremely closely, and obviously from an Israeli perspective. One of the things on this renewed round of attacks by Israel is that it's not exactly clear to the Israeli public, and the Israeli leadership, both the political and the military leadership, has not exactly articulated to the Israeli public what is the expected outcome on the strategic level of these renewed strikes. And so the Israeli public right now, first of all, there's a lot of pressure from the Hostage Families Forum on the political leadership in order to accept a ceasefire, even end this war, to rescue the surviving 20 hostages. There is a growing sense of exhaustion among the Israeli public. You have reservists, reserve soldiers who have families, who have careers, who have companies, who have been serving 300, 400, 500 days in reserve duty, and they're quite exhausted. You have young conscripts, 18, 19, 20 years old, who have had nothing but war for the last 600 plus days in very difficult and dangerous conditions. And so the Israeli public, on the one hand, has a sense of exhaustion. On the other hand, it's not exactly clear, and it has not been articulated by the political leadership what exactly is the end game here, beyond sort of general kind of slogans or platitudes from the government. And so you have this sense by the public that we don't exactly know what we're doing, and perhaps the excitement by the press or the international community to announce serious progress on the ceasefire talks a couple of weeks ago were premature, and the Israeli public feels that it's in a bit of a limbo state at this point, waiting to see what happens.
And I know that, months ago, the Israeli people did have protests, in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv against the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, because they feel that he has deviated from the focus, which is to return the remaining hostages back home. Do they still feel that way? Are there still those protests going on in Israel?
Some of the public certainly feels frustration with Netanyahu. You have a lot of elements in Israeli society who from the beginning sensed that some of the considerations excuse me, of the Netanyahu government and of Netanyahu remain staying in power in order to stave off the judicial hearings that are taking place in Tel Aviv. However, large enough parts of the Israeli public still stand behind Prime Minister Netanyahu still stand behind the government, still stand behind the decision. And of course, the successful strikes on Iran's nuclear program reinstilled a sense of trust that was wearing away in Netanyahu himself as a prime minister and in this current government. We're now at a point where there is some tension between the Haredi, between the ultra-Orthodox parties, and the Likud party, which is Netanyahu's ruling coalition. So it's leaving a bit of instability within the coalition itself. You are still seeing pressure from sizable parts of the public that a deal needs to be reached, in some people's words, at any cost, in order to get the hostages back. And Netanyahu has not made it especially clear to the public exactly what the goals are. I can tell you, just having been in this business of military and intelligence affairs for a couple of decades now, there might very well be moves, political moves, international moves, diplomatic moves that are being cooked up, and they are not being articulated to the public because either Hamas utilizes that intelligence from open sources for its own, in order to protract the conflict, or in order to keep domestic politics out of what are strategic considerations. And that is something that, knowing Netanyahu and how he operates, that something may very well be happening behind the scenes.
Dan, just before you go, does the Prime Minister still consider himself or the Israeli government accountable to the UN and other international bodies, or do they consider these bodies an obstruction to Israel's plans in Gaza?
Yeah, the Israeli public, the Israeli government, I think it's safe to say this is quite a consensus here in Israeli society, does not respect the United Nations, does not trust the United Nations. It sees that it is a body that is absolutely hypocritical when it comes to Israel. Nobody ever claims Israel or its actions are perfect, but when you have dozens and dozens of UN resolutions castigating and criticizing Israel and hyper-focusing on Israel, while serious human rights abusers like Iran, like North Korea, like Sudan, like Yemen, like Syria under Bashar al-Assad, receive combined a tenth of the criticism that Israel does. It is a body that is not taken seriously here. The UN and especially the UN RWA, UNRWA, was seen as one of the key problems that protracted the conflict. There were UNRWA employees that were involved in the October 7th attack. We know that the school curriculum given by these UN institutions has led nothing but radicalization against Israel. And we see the UN here in Israel, and I can say this is almost from end to end on the political spectrum. This is a consensus view that the UN is a place for political theater, that it is far more impacted by blocs such as the 56 nation Muslim bloc of nations that have far more power than Israel ever does, Israel and its allies ever does, and nothing that it does can be taken seriously, and that generally it does more harm than good on the political levels, and that it is not a serious and intellectually or politically honest body, but one manipulated and used for political theater and for political gains against Israel.
Dan Pfefferman, National Security Analyst and Intelligence Officer specializing in Middle East affairs. It's been a pleasure having you on The World today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.
We turn to Syria now, as the UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk calls for accountability and justice for the killings and other gross humanitarian human rights violations and abuses in the southern city of Suwaida. Turk's perspective was expressed by his spokesperson, Ravina Shamdasani, who spoke about receiving reports of widespread violations and abuses leading to mass displacement of the population in the predominantly Druze governorate.
Immediate steps need to be taken to ensure protection of people in Suwaida and across Syria. The bloodshed and the violence must stop, and the protection of all people must be the utmost priority in line with international human rights law. Credible reports that our office has received indicate widespread violations and abuses, including summary executions and arbitrary killings, kidnappings, destruction of private property, and looting of homes in the southern city of Suwaida. Among the reported perpetrators were members of the security forces and individuals affiliated with the interim authorities, as well as other armed elements from the area, including the Druze and Bedouin. Syria's interim authorities must ensure independent, prompt, and transparent investigations into all violations. All those responsible must be held to account in accordance with international standards. An incitement to violence and hate speech, both online and offline, must also be stopped. It is crucial that immediate steps are taken to prevent the recurrence of such violence. Vengeance is clearly not the answer. In one incident on the 15th of July that we have documented, the unlawful killing of at least 13 people when armed individuals affiliated with the interim authorities deliberately opened fire at a family gathering. On the same day, they reportedly summarily executed 6 men near their homes in 2 separate incidents. We've also documented the public humiliation of a Druze man, including the forcible shaving of his mustache, which is an important cultural symbol for the Druze community. Attacks such as the one on Damascus on Wednesday pose great risks to civilians and civilian objects. Such attacks must cease. Syrians deserve truth, accountability, and guarantees that such violations will not be repeated.
As for the U.S. envoy to Syria, Tom Barak, what is happening in Sueda is a problem of communication. During an interview with U.S. media, Mr. Barak doubled down on Washington's support for the new government, as there is no plan B to working with it to unite the country, still reeling from years of civil war and racked by new sectarian violence. Barak is ambassador to Turkey and special envoy to Syria with a short-term mandate in Lebanon. He spoke in Beirut following more than a week of clashes in Syria's southern province of Sueda between militias of the Druze religious minority and Sunni Muslim Bedouin tribes.
The Hezbollah disarmament agreement is something that is so internal. Remember, America has Hezbollah as a foreign terrorist organization. So we have no skin in the game in discussing anything with Hezbollah. That's not where we're at. We're discussing with the nation state, your government, how we can help. So when we say what happens to the U.S. if this doesn't happen is disappointment. There's no consequence. It's disappointment. We're here trying to help, trying to influence, trying to usher, trying to bring calm minds together and use our influence on all sides, just influence, to get back to the model that you all want to see, which is a better life for your kids, prosperity, and peace all around us in a very difficult environment. But there's no consequence, there's no threat, there's no whip. We're here on a voluntary basis trying to usher to a solution, that's it. Well, we can't compel Israel to do anything, can we? That's not, America is not here to compel Israel to do anything. We're here to use our influence to bring calm minds together to come to a conclusion. The U.S. has no business in trying to compel Israel to do anything. We're here, as I said 100 times, to help you come to a conclusion with your neighbors, and it's not just Israel. There's other conditions and components, and it's up to you. It's up to the government. It's up to all of you when you're fed up with, tribal rivalries. When everybody is finally come to the conclusion that there has to be a better understanding with your neighbors as to how you live. America can only influence. We're not going to have more boots on the ground in an adversarial nature anywhere. We're just not going to do it.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has said his country has proposed a new round of peace talks with Russia for next week. In his nightly address, Zelensky said that Rustem Umerov, recently appointed National Security and Defense Council Secretary, offered the Russian side a meeting, emphasizing that Ukraine is prepared for talks at the leadership level. Zelensky also stressed the need to increase the pace of negotiations, calling for urgent steps to achieve a ceasefire. His announcement comes a day after Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkish President Erdogan reportedly discussed resuming Ukraine-Russian peace talks in Istanbul. Ukraine and Russia held 2 rounds of bilateral peace talks earlier this year in Istanbul, first on May 16, again on June 2nd, after more than 3 years without direct negotiations. The meetings resulted in significant prisoner exchanges, but no significant steps towards a ceasefire. And in the final installment of our Journey to War series, our correspondent Kayode Okikulu brings us a report of his visit to the site of missile attacks that killed 28 people in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv.
It's the morning after the missile scare in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. So far, there's been no direct drone or missile strike on our location. But not everyone is so lucky. In the early days of the war, the town of Bucha was ground zero. 448 bodies were recovered in what is now known as the Bucha massacre.
This is his name on the table, Мирон Зверичук.
І ось його тіло росіяни розстріляли і скинули в гараж в оглядову яму.
This is his body. The Russians shot him dead.
The war began with an invasion and the move to capture the capital by Russia, a move that was jointly condemned by Nigeria and 140 countries at the United Nations. The world had thought that the invasion would be over in days with Russia taking over, but the Ukrainian president made an unusual order. He called for the bridge leading to the capital Kyiv to be destroyed to stop Russia's advance. So I'm standing just right next to the bridge that leads to Kyiv. Now this bridge was destroyed by the Ukrainian military just so Russia wouldn't gain access to Ukraine's capital Kyiv. A necessary destruction, you can call it. The cars at this place called the car graveyard are a memorial to that effect. Destruction is not in short supply here, some fresher than the others. Just a matter of days ago, this building was split in half by a missile attack. An American citizen is one of the 28 people killed. We're at the Václav Havel Boulevard in Kyiv, where there's been a major attack on this block of flats. It's been described as the worst so far on Kyiv. Over 20 people died in that attack. And it just shows you vividly the impact of war. This used to be a playground where children play, where they come out and just play on the swing, which is really play around, but this is a shadow of what it used to be as a result of the attack. I asked the official how the people were caught unawares in spite of the air raid alert. Does that mean the people did not go to the shelter? Is that why they were killed?
Looks that way.
People rendered homeless, without shelter, but they are grateful they have food, at least. The journey is not complete without speaking to those who have participated in the war, who are now prisoners of war. Some of them, Africans.
Russia, I was chosen because they were saying it's good time for African people. You can go there. They can accept your visa. Other European countries, they will not accept my Somalian visa. The Somalian passport is the worst Somalian ever passport I ever see in my life. Monthly, they are giving me $2,000, and in the year when I signed the contract, they gave me $20,000.
Some Russians.
First, is there any misconception about Russia that you maybe have heard you want to clear up? Do you think that Russia is perceived wrongly?
We are just as much people as anybody else. We are not orcs that we're being called.
This war is not being fought with arms, drones, and missiles alone. There is also the information war going on online.
I must say that they are so much better, the Russians, at the game of disinformation.
The foreign minister says Ukraine is countering what they describe as disinformation by Russia about the war. And he has a message for African countries who see Russia as an ally.
Look at facts, first of all, and sooner or later you will get the bill. You will get the bill, believe me, we know this very well. So that's why it is always important to diversify your relations with different parties, to diversify your security, to diversify your energy security, your food security. But in any case, believe me, all such countries, all such leaders, sooner or later will get the bill.
Still, the war rages on. On the fifth day, I get ready to depart Ukraine. I'm leaving behind a country at war, a people fighting every day for survival. At this rate, it's tough to say when the war will end, but each passing day brings us closer to that possibility. In the dead of the night, we cross the border and we arrive safely in Poland. And as I step into the safety of Poland, one truth echoes loudest. War steals homes, limbs, and lives, but not hope. That hope, fragile as it may be, still flickers like a lone candle in the dark, waiting for peace to come. Kayode Ogikulu for Channels Television News.
In other parts of Europe, Reform UK party leader Nigel Farage has pledged to take back control of Britain's streets and get a grip on the lawless country. Farage was speaking at a press conference earlier today. He touched on a number of issues, including immigration, saying his party could adopt similar tactics to the Trump administration in the United States.
Crime is falling, so please don't worry your poor little heads. Well, that's because the crime survey for England and Wales is based on completely false data. If you look at police recorded crime, which is what we've done for our research all through this, you can see that actually there are some significant rises in crimes of all kinds, particularly crimes against the person. We're actually facing, in many parts of our country, nothing short of societal collapse. And people are scared to go out of the shops, scared to let their kids out. That is a society that is degrading, and it's happening very, very rapidly. I'm astonished that there has been so little debate in Westminster amongst our political classes on this issue, because I'm sure they must, in their MPs' inboxes, get members of the public telling them just how grim things really are. The idea, the concept that we're living in a system of two-tier policing and two-tier justice under two-tier care has really taken hold. You only have to look at the reluctance to prosecute those violent thugs in Manchester Airport who beat up those police officers. It took months and months and months for any prosecution to be brought, and I suspect the reason that it happened is because Reform said if they didn't, we would take on our own private prosecution. And yet, Lucy Connolly and others like that, and she received a 31-month prison sentence, albeit for saying something deeply intemperate and wrong, of that there's no question. Her case was dealt with in days. But there's a parallel from which I think we can draw great inspiration. I worked in the 1980s for a couple of Wall Street houses in my days in the commodity markets, and I remember if you left a restaurant in New York at 8, 9 o'clock at night, you made sure the taxi was there, waiting, the guy gave you a wave, so that you literally spent sort of 5 or 10 seconds leaving the venue. So bad was street crime in New York. And yet, 10 years later, you could wander about New York at 2 o'clock in the morning, being really unconcerned that anything would go wrong.
The mayor of Houston, John Whitmore, has called for direct flights between Nigeria and Houston, as well as opening a Nigerian consulate in the state. This was highlighted at the meeting between the chairman, CEO of Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Abike Dabiri-Erewa, and Mayor Pro Tem Martha Castex Tatum, representing Mayor John Whitmore in Texas. Noting that Houston hosts one of the largest population of Nigerians in the U.S., the mayor said these measures would further deepen collaboration in areas such as consular representation, trade, and diaspora engagement.
I think it would be incredible if there was a direct flight from Houston to Nigeria with the growing Nigerian population in Houston, and the ability for us to forge relationships with Nigeria. I think it just makes it easier for us when there is a direct flight. I know that we can fly to Washington and then get to Nigeria. If there was a direct flight from Houston to Nigeria, I think it would also simplify the going to and fro for business people, for people to visit their families, and for us to continue to foster the cultural relationships as well. Our Nigerian population has been a tremendous partner for the city of Houston. We want to continue to make sure that they feel at home in Houston and that they can do business in the city of Houston, and that all of the things that improve their quality of life, that we are working towards providing that for our residents.
The death toll has been rising in the Bangladeshi Air Force training jet that crashed into a school campus in Dhaka, the Bangladeshi capital. As of the last hour, at least 19 people were said to have died. The number of those injured set at 164. The armed forces said in a statement on Facebook the F-7 jet experienced a mechanical fault after taking off for a training exercise just after 1 p.m. local time, and that the pilot was among those killed. A doctor at the National Institute of Burn and Plastic Surgery said more than 50 people, including children and adults, were taken to hospital with burns. The Muhammad Yunus, the leader of Bangladesh's interim government, said necessary measures would be taken to investigate the cause of the incident and ensure that all kinds of assistance is rendered. Meanwhile, the powerful Ecuadorian gang leader Adolfo Mercias Villama has been extradited to the United States to face charges of drug and arms trafficking. Known as Fito, he was recaptured in June, more than a year after he escaped from a high-security prison where he was serving a 34-year sentence for a series of crimes. He'll appear in a U.S. federal court later today. He'll plead not guilty to international charges of drug and weapons trafficking. Macias was leader of Los Choneros gang, which is linked to powerful criminal organizations from Mexico and the Balkans. He's also suspected of having ordered the assassination of presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio in 2023. The world's largest hydropower dam is being built in Tibetan territory by China, but this has sparked concerns from India and Bangladesh. Chinese Premier Li Qiang presided over a ceremony marking the start of construction of the Yarlung Sangpo River on Saturday. The river flows through the Tibetan plateau. The project has attracted criticism for its potential impact on millions of Indians and Bangladeshis living downriver, as well as the surrounding environment and local Tibetans. Beijing says a scheme costing an estimated 1.2 trillion won, that's $167 billion, will prioritize ecological protection and boost local prosperity. When completed, the project, also known as the Mutual Hydropower Station, will overtake the Three Gorges Dam as the world's largest and could generate 3 times more energy. Experts and officials have flagged concerns that the new dam would empower China to control or divert the trans-border Yarlung Sangpo, which flows south into India's Arunachal Pradesh and Assam states, as well as Bangladesh, where it feeds into the Siang, Brahmaputra, and Jamuna rivers. A 61-year-old man has died after he was sucked into a magnetic resonance imaging machine at a medical center while he was wearing a heavy metal necklace. The man entered a room at Nassau Open MRI in Westbury on New York's Long Island without permission as the MRI machine was running. His wife told local media she had called him into the MRI room after her scan, and his chain necklace caused him to be hurled towards the machine when he walked in. Officials say the incident resulted in a medical episode and the man was later pronounced dead. MRI machines use a strong magnetic field to produce detailed images. Patients are typically asked to remove metal items and change out of their clothes before undergoing MRI scans or going near the machine. Although police have not named the victim, Adrian Jones McAllister told local television station News 12 Long Island that it was her husband, Keith, who died. An undercover officer from Peruvian National Police's Green Squad, disguised as the iconic Mexican TV character Chapulín Colorado, has been regarded now as somewhat of a hero after he led a raid on a suspected drug den on Saturday in Lima's Cosmos district. The disguised agent smashed a metal grate with a sledgehammer and confronted detainees with the character's signature red mallet, while other officers secured drugs and questioned suspects before escorting them to police vehicles. The operation is part of a camouflage strategy which, according to Green Squad Chief Pedro Reyes, was the best way to approach that drug point to intervene without being detected. The squad chief said the choice of disguise depends on the social context, noted that Chapulín Colorado was selected for this operation because a biographical series about the actor who portrayed the character is currently airing. Well, I guess there'll be more competitions like this in the near future. I'm talking about the RoboCup 2025, the World Cup of Robotics and Artificial Intelligence, which began on Thursday in Salvador, Brazil. This event promotes the development of robots capable of operating in various scenarios, including football matches, rescue operations, and service robotics. The football element aims to develop a team that could beat the human FIFA World Cup champions by 2050. I doubt that very much. So here they are, the humanoid robots competing in a football match, being as human as they possibly can. The robots can react, they can plan and act in real time without remote control, interacting with each other during the game. And so all autonomous robots will compete across 5 leagues, featuring both humanoid designs and wheel-based models. The gathering, taking place from 15th to 21st July, will bring together researchers, students, enthusiasts, and companies from around the world to compete and learn about the latest technological advances in robotics and artificial intelligence. RoboCup is the largest robotics and artificial intelligence competition in the world. It's been active since 1997 and it's estimated that around 2,000 participants from 40 countries compete in the contest in various years. And if you love fantasy, then make a stop over at the vast balloon-based exhibition newly opened in Vienna, Austria, where you'll see 3,000 square meters transformed into a vibrant fantasy world made entirely of balloons. It's called Balloon Worlds, an immersive show that is now one of a kind in Europe. It features more than 500,000 colorful sculptures crafted into lifelike animals and imaginative landscapes. Dutch artist Guido Verhoef led the creation alongside 36 balloon specialists from around the world, including Japan, China, the United States, Latin America, and several European countries. Among the themed zones, the Australian area has become a visitor's favorite. Designed by balloon artist Sabina Kellner, it features dolphins leaping over waves, detailed kangaroos, and expressive koalas. According to her, it was most important for her the dolphins jump over the waves. We'll see them in a moment, I guess. Really inspiring work. Visitors are delighted at seeing the intricacy and scale of the sculptures, say that dolphins are superbly made, very lifelike. Others are amazed at the technical skills involved, saying they cannot imagine doing anything like this. The exhibition offers interactive elements, including balloon workshops, selfie-friendly installations. Balloon Worlds will remain open in the Austrian capital until September 1st this year. So if you want to make a holiday stopover, you can. Organizers are expecting over 200,000 visitors while it remains open. I'm surprised the children are not inspired to burst some of those balloons. And thanks for watching the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani.